Thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming out and listening to my little presentations. I've got two things to talk about. One of them is more of a technology, and it's one thing that we're implementing in our codecs. And the other is a product, and also kind of a product category that Tieline has been working on, and now we're the leaders in it. And I'll explain a little bit about what we're doing. So I'll talk about this first, and then we'll talk about IPv6. First of all, how many people know or have used Tieline products? Oh, yay! We are a company that all we make are codecs, and all we're interested really in making are audio codecs. We're a company of 30 people. We have an office in Perth, Australia, and Indianapolis, Indiana. And I've worked for them for a little over a year. And actually, I worked for a long time for a company that ended up being a competitor to Tieline. And when Tieline came out with a POTS codec several years ago, they started really going after, very successfully, because their POTS codec was quite good, the company I worked for. So I knew them from a long time from afar, and they approached me about a year and a half ago, and I said, God, I'd love to work with you guys, because their focus is only on audio codecs. And we have 30 people who work for the company, 26 of them are engineers. So we're really focused on that. One of the products that we started coming up with about a year and a half ago is on an iPhone. And it's a 15 kilohertz audio codec that's completely on an iPhone. It can also be used on an iPad, and I'm carrying it around on the iPad because it's just easier for anyone to see. That's not what I'll give the presentation on, but I'll just explain a little bit about what we're doing and our thought process behind it. Several companies do have, there's one other company, they're located, I believe, in Massachusetts, Comrex. They also have an app. The difference between their app and our app is this is our business. We really, really believe that doing iPhones for codecs is the future. There will always be a place for hardware codecs, but when I can get a reporter from KGO Radio in San Francisco calling me saying, I just ran out to this event, or the people from CBS News saying, we covered the hurricane with our iPhones, that tells me something. So as a company, we decided to really invest technology into making an app that makes sense for people to use as a codec on the iPhone. The reason we picked the iPhone and not the Droid is for a very simple reason. We do live tech support at our office in Indy and our office in Australia. So honest to goodness, a few weeks ago, I know this would be hard to believe that someone would do this. We had one of our stations call up and say, well, we've got the play-by-play guy. He's going to install this app on his iPhone, and we want him to cover a football game. And he really needs to be on the air in 15 minutes. Okay. The play-by-play guy in his day job was a 50-year-old lawyer who'd never really used an iPhone. So I get him on the phone, and I say, so I start talking him through downloading the app, and he's starting to panic, saying, I can't do this, we'll just go with a cell phone. I was able to talk him through. I knew exactly what buttons for him to push, and he got on the air and he did the game in 15 minutes, and he did a 15 kilohertz live feed for 2 hours with his iPhone. This was a guy that had never really used this before. That's why we like the iPhone, because no matter who you've got out in the field, you back at the station or us in Indiana are going to be able to talk the person through. Because it is a closed system on the iPhone, we know that there's not going to be, well, in theory, there are not going to be bugs on it. There's not going to be viruses. So we're not going to sit there and have to troubleshoot and wonder, what virus has this guy downloaded onto this? Because of those reasons, and we wanted it to really be a serious app, that's why we chose the iPhone. And that's what we're going with now. What we've done, very briefly, and I'll pass this around for everyone to look at, is we went a little different direction than anyone else. We worked with NPR, and they wanted to be able to get anyone who was going out in the field doing reports, anyone doing remotes, or people they were interviewing out in the field to be able to use this. So it had to be really easy. We didn't want them to have to program anything in. So what we did is set it up that you get an administrator account, you program in all the data for the person, what the IP address is, anything like that, and what they get out in the field once they download it is this. And I'll pass it around, and all the person can do, they could press anything they want, but nothing's going to happen. All they can do is hit one button and connect it. And now I'm connected. It's a 15 kilohertz audio codec, but the cool thing is it's also recording it at the same time. So, and we had somebody use it last week, and he said, oh boy, it's a shame I didn't record this. I really wish I would have recorded my live broadcast. And I said, well, actually you did. And then I had to talk him through finding where it was. So let's say your remote is finished. The person out in the field disconnects. Oops. It automatically goes to a site where they FTP it. And that's all. And they can't press anything else. And from there, you could actually set it up that the person could get in and do some editing if they wanted to. But we really thought that there's a place out there for very, very non-technical people to be able to use something, and with the iPhone and iPad technology, it's actually available. So that's what our thought process was. We think that this is a beginning of something, so we're really making it as a product. And we've got everyone from CBS News, NPR. If you listen to a lot of the interviews on NPR, probably about 30 or 40% of the interviews that you think are in the studio aren't. They're using their iPhones. So I think it's a technology that's really starting to get someplace, and that's one of the reasons we started going in this direction. So stay tuned. We'll be coming out with more things, but that's our thought process, and that's what we've been working on it. So
you were saying CBS. I was talking to Larry King last week, and he was out in Chicago or someplace out there, and he got a call from one of the producers and said, can you do this interview for us?
Yeah, that's...
Yeah. 15 minutes later, interview on the air.
Fox News,
too. Fox News uses it, ESPN uses it, and it's amazing that we really haven't done much advertising on it. A lot of it's been word of mouth, and we set people up, and the reporters love it.
Audio interface you have?
Well, on the iPhone itself, we've just, we're a small company, and it really was a huge task for us to do. We're coming out next month with a mic adapter. So the iPhone actually sits in an adapter. Out of the bottom of the adapter is an XLR. So you can plug in an XLR dynamic mic to it and 2 pairs of headsets. And it has AGC, and actually it's fully controllable.
So this is full duplex with the IFB and everything?
Yes, yeah. And that was kind of the missing key to everything, is not having that piece of equipment. The reason I was saying it's almost a Goliath-like task is we had to get Apple approval. And there are 5 steps to getting Apple approval. And to do that, we literally had to send everything to Apple many, many times, including all the packaging, everything. And they just last month approved our final product. We couldn't order, I could have had it here today. We couldn't order these connectors. You can't order them in any bulk until you have that approval. So, and guess what? They're back ordered. So it's been a long process for us to get that done.
What's on the studio side to receive this audio?
You can do it one of 3 ways. We have a little low-cost IP-only codec called the Bridget. So you can use that. And a lot of stations do it. Bridget, yeah, it's a little blue codec. Or if anyone has one of our G3s, our commander units.
It'll work on a G3?
It'll work on the G3. Just make sure that you upgrade it to the latest firmware. And in fact, actually on the latest firmware, what we've done, we started out with 1 connection, and now you can actually have 2 reported connections on 1 G3. Most people aren't doing 2 reported connections on 1 G3. What they're doing is, we get used a lot for sports. So they've got a commander on one end connecting to the studio, and then someone runs down and interviews the coach. They've got the iPhone app, so they're connecting back to the station, 1 iPhone app and 1 G3. But you could actually do 2. And we're coming out with a new codec at the end of the year called a Genie, which it will be able to have 6 connections.
So this eliminates the G3 on the remote side?
Well, not really. It supplements it. It doesn't eliminate it because with the G3s, you can have two people doing a remote.
Right.
So, but for little one-person remotes, this, yeah.
So it sounds like this is how you can plug the outboard of your mixer into the room.
Yeah, and that's,
Off you go.
a lot of people, they like the G3s, but there is, secondly, for your secondary remotes, let's say you have two remotes on a Saturday morning. One of your remotes can go out and do this, or if it's just someone, we have our one station in Vancouver, they do it, they are very clever about how they've done it. They now sell a second and third remote, and they send people out with their iPhones, and something we hadn't thought of, if they have people recording spots locally, let's say a car dealer, they've given the car dealer, who advertises fairly often, they've given him the app. He doesn't have to drive into the studio to do recording anymore. And I'd never thought of that, and I thought, wow, that's a good idea. So we see it either if you're doing mono remotes or little smaller remotes. Yeah, it works. And at first we weren't quite sure, geez, would this connect for an entire football game? And we really weren't telling people that we thought it would because we didn't have the confidence because we hadn't gone out and tested it for hours and hours. And I told people, I don't know if you should use it for that. And they did, of course, anyway. And then they called me back and said it worked. So I feel a lot of confidence knowing that a lot of the stations in Texas have used it for that, and they did a good job. So.
What were you worried about, battery life or just
Losing the connection. You know, we knew it was good for short reports, but we didn't know how it would be for a game that you've got a bunch of people on a network. And here's a good example. You know, for some of these college football games, you can have 80,000 people at a stadium. I'm still not sure I do it for that, but for a high school game, it seems to work quite well. Yeah, you know what? I have an AT&T iPhone and a Verizon iPhone, and I have to say lately, I feel I'm getting a lot better results with the Verizon iPhone. I'm going to get a Sprint iPhone too, so I can race that. And I used to really be a big fan of AT&T, but lately I've just been seeing better results with Verizon.
So can you take, for example, an existing G3 for remote and literally run the audio out of that thing into this?
No, well, I wouldn't do that because then you're going to compress it twice. I mean, if you why?
Well, it's just the G3's got all the connectors on it and all that stuff, and the headphone amps and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, you could have the
Easier
G3
than
at the
mixer.
station, but you'd be doing two types of compression on it, so, and then back at the station. So I'd rather
So this little docking station's got everything you need.
the docking station, and then for the iPhone, there's a docking station. I've got pictures of it, and then there's also we've got some people who are using. There's a another product by I think it's Alesis for the iPad that people are using as well. So.
You started to say there were 3 ways of receiving at the station. I thought there
Oh,
were
thank you.
2.
There, so G3, thank you, Bridget. Or if you're just doing if you're not doing it live, if you're just sending an FTP report, you could also then, you don't need the codec at the other end. We'd rather you buy a codec. But, yeah, but you know, there are NPR stations that they don't use that because of that.
Well, if it's easy enough to put the app on the cell phone,
Yeah.
you get a Verizon, get yourself an AT&T. Run 2 of them for coverage areas just in case.
Yeah,
And we had
that's.
a station where I used to work, it had a Comrex. They had an access, and the announcer said, "Oh, I went to school, Blair Academy, it's great, the cell phone coverage is wonderful." And we got there and everything else.
Do, 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 do. Yeah. Yeah, that's just when someone praises
You
it.
had a Verizon card.
Yeah, and that's
And, you know, so you're better, for the cost of a cell phone, right, you know, that's great.
having the, yeah, that's actually, I'd never thought of that, and that's a good idea. And the nice thing, too, is just one of the other little features. When I pass this around, you'll see that we have a name for the Bridget. We have a name for the codec back at our office. The reason we've done that is so, let's say you have someone just casually using this, they'll never know your IP address, so they can't call in or hack into your system independently. So, yeah, we're very lucky. The guy who works for us, who designed this, came from a security background, so he's very, very security conscious. So I'll pass that around. that's my more practical part of the presentation. And now the other part I was going to talk about is IPv6, which, again, our little company, even though we're only 30 people, we're the first broadcast equipment manufacturer to actually put in IPv6 in our equipment. Who knows about IPv6? Who's ready for IPv6? Okay, that's okay. Don't worry, I've yet to find someone who, at the beginning of this, is ready for it. So,
Yeah.
so what is this going to be? What is this new technology? So, I was having a bit of fun with this. So, is this going to be IPv-Geddon? It's not, don't worry. So what are we doing? We're changing this Internet Protocol version 4, to Internet Protocol version 6. And the reason that we're doing this is quite simple. Because we're running out of addresses on IPv4. You know, the addresses that you use, the last ones were issued to each regional Internet resource guide in February of this year. February 3rd, in fact, was the last date. There cannot be any more issued. So we had to go to a newer system. We have to go to a system with more addresses. And that's what has kind of been behind this. But also, IPv4 has been around since the early 80s, and it's really time that we upgrade that technology. So what's left, this isn't something that in the next month we're going to run out of, but it is looming out there. What is left is only about 13%, and that's it. Everything else has been allocated. And as you have different internet addresses, you know, at home I've got them, everyone has them, and there'll be more. That's when we start to run out of it. So why don't we just stay with what we've got, and we'll worry about those other people as they get new addresses. Well, we can't really do that, and there's a very simple reason we can't do that. Because the new internet version that we're going to go with doesn't talk to the old version. So we actually have to start running things so they're running in parallel. But don't worry, it's not nearly as onerous as it sounds. So what is this IPv6 thing that I'm talking about, and why do we even care about it? What it basically means is several changes in the way that the internet works, and I think a lot of them are actually very good changes. Actually, all of them are. Some are a little more interesting than others. Number one, it'll change the way we do network management, connectivity, the address length. Don't worry. There will be a change in security. There's a lot of debate on that part of it, and I am not an IP security person. That's not my area of expertise. So you'll get people debating on whether they think it'll be more or less secure or just as secure. And I think it will be definitely as secure. I don't know if it'll really be more secure. As far as the network management of it, it will be easier to program things in. We won't have internal and external addresses. We will just have internet addresses. Because there's always security attached to them. Don't worry about, oh, no, you know, everyone's going to hack into our system. That actually has been looked at. Think of where we were in the early 80s, and think of where we are now. I mean, would you ever, most of us, have dreamed in 1983 that we all would be on Facebook? You know, we'd be doing some of the things we're doing now? Okay. Okay. Well, one of two of us are on Facebook. Look, my mother-in-law is now on Facebook, which.
Tell her to call me and tell me how to set one up.
Well, she's got grandkids. That's the beauty of it.
Facebook.com.
Yeah.
Sign up. Put a username and a password.
Yeah. You gotta get what you want it to do the way you want it to do it, and forget it.
Well, and then they keep changing it. But in any case, one of the things I really see this doing. This isn't really necessarily for broadcasters specifically, but I think there's going to be a new period of innovation. I'm very hopeful that this will start leading to a lot of new products, and that just as someone who would like to see some new companies out there. So what we have that we're coming up with is a new way of putting in addresses and a new number of addresses. Are we going to sit there and say, oh my gosh, well, if we do this system, aren't we going to just run out of addresses after a period of time? In theory, no, we won't, because there will be more grains of sand on the earth than there will be internet addresses under the new system. We're going to,
Other way around.
Oh, you're right. There are going to be more internet addresses than grains of sand. Look, there's going to be a lot of internet addresses. Every device will have a set of numbers. So instead of you getting an internet address and then you can move it around, when you get a device and you register it, it will get its own set of numbers. This is great for broadcasters because that means no matter where that device goes, it'll always have that same address. That will really help with some of the confusion we face sometimes. Internet security will be built in, so you won't be having to turn it on or off. It'll be part of the system that they'll actually have. So that's why there's questions about whether it'll be more or less secure. It'll be more secure in that people won't have to worry about turning something on. It'll just be there. So, and please don't debate me on whether in reality this will be more or less secure, because I really am out of my element on that part of it. So, is this going to be the next Y2K for all of us? Are we going to switch this over on one date and say, well, boy, I hope this works? No, it's not, and there's a good reason for that. There's actually been a tremendous amount of planning into this. What we're going to do, and what Tieline has already started to do in both the Genie and the Bridget, is companies will run something called Dualstack. You'll have the same connector, so it's not going to be two separate connectors, but it'll actually be two different versions of IP running into the same system. What exactly is the Dualstack protocol? It just simply means you're running IPv4 and IPv6 at the same time. And I could almost bet you a box of donuts that within a month or so after this talk, somehow you'll get some device that will have IPv6 on it, because they're starting to come out. And it was funny, I talked to a bunch of broadcasters in Ohio, and then a guy called me up the next week and said, I bought a home computer, and now all of a sudden it's asking me all sorts of stuff about
Right, if you're
IPv6.
running Windows 7 or even Vista.
Yeah,
it has
now
the
it's starting to ask about that.
on it,
So why don't we just all switch now? I mean, wouldn't that make things easier, and then we wouldn't have to worry about it? Again, these two systems don't talk to each other. So everyone who's on IPv4 can't just automatically switch over to IPv6. And if you've got a device that's just IPv4 and doesn't have the ability to talk to run Dualstack, then it's a huge limitation. And that's one of the reasons I'm kind of going around talking to people is I think we're not really getting the word out. Well, Tieline is, but I think a lot of us in broadcasting don't realize, well, I'm buying this piece of equipment, it's only IPv4 and there's no way to have it run Dualstack. And maybe not now, you won't regret it, but there'll be a day, depending on what the equipment is, that you'll say, you know, I wish I would have known this. So that's...
My silly question, the equipment that is coming out now will run 4 and 6, it'll run dual stack.
Yes.
A lot of the things. So older technology can talk to the new stuff until it's phased out. Or at least it seems to be.
Make sure you ask, because we're the only broadcast equipment manufacturer so far that has IPv6. And the other manufacturers know about it. This is not some secret. But there's no one pushing, saying, so are you guys going to be implementing this?
One of the things you have to watch out for is your current switches and your current routers and things of that nature are probably only 4.
Right.
And if you plug a 6 in,
You can't push it through.
you can't push it through.
Well, that's why we're running dual stack.
Yeah.
But that's part of what I'm saying is, if you're getting a new router, make sure that it's IPv6 or it's running both, because it'll be easier when you start transitioning. So I will give anyone who wants this information this slide. I certainly don't expect anyone to look at this. But the big thing about this slide is this is what the addresses will look like.
There will be a quiz later.
Now, if you want to play a sick joke on someone, I was trying to tell one broadcaster, I said, well, the only flaw in the system is that your equipment can't memorize the address. So you'll have to put it in every time. And for a half a second, he thought I was serious. That is not the case, by the
He
way.
has to use binary.
There you go. Or convert it to octet.
So one of the reasons that we don't have to worry about this being some Y2K panic is we've already done something called IPv6 World Test Day. This was very exciting. Although there weren't that many companies that participated, this was, yes.
Same day as the
Yeah, we were extremely, that's right. Actually, this has taken place already, so this was good. What we did, there were 600 companies worldwide that got together all over the world and said, on June 8th, let's turn on all our IPv6 equipment and let's make sure worldwide that this actually works. And we've got the flaws, the kinks worked out. And Tieline participated, a lot of obviously much bigger companies, Google, Facebook, CNN, Comcast. This was a very curious one. It says I don't know.
You count how to make sure you can count that.
So everybody turned all their equipment on worldwide, and it worked flawlessly. So we were quite happy about that. There were a few reasons that our little company wanted to participate. I really do very firmly believe we just have an incredibly talented group of engineers. And they wanted bragging rights. They really wanted to be able to say we were the first company to have an IPv6 compatible broadcast product. And we did it. We got it. We also wanted to test internally whether this was really going to work and whether we had anything that we needed to work out. So it was very, very useful to have this day. And it did. It worked. So now we can officially say we're the first company to have an IPv6 codec. So. And no one can ever take that away from us, so we were thrilled. Although it was pretty funny when I was asking people on that day, so are you participating? You know how you get kind of in your little closed world and you forget that the rest of the world probably doesn't care about IPv6? Yeah, they weren't wearing shirts saying it's IPv6 World Test Day. In the US, more people than you think are actually ready for this. One thing about the US is because we're the headquarters of companies like Facebook, Yahoo, and Google, they have really put a push on this to get IPv6 ready. And Tieline is one of the companies that the school I went to, University of Nebraska in Omaha, I put them in there. So, yeah, you're going, what?
Yeah.
Why are they in there?
Sesame Street.
Exactly. One of the reasons that we're doing quite well as far as getting things ready in the U.S. is because of the U.S. government. Say what you will, we have done an excellent job on this. Starting in 2005, the U.S. government said, you know what, we really need to mandate this. And they were smart to do that because they said by a certain date we will not buy any equipment for the U.S. government that is not IPv6 compliant. And because of that, there's been a push by people like Cisco. They need to make equipment that's IPv6 compliant, otherwise they can't sell anything to any branch of the U.S. government. So that's been quite helpful, and they've been pushing along the way to do that. It's been a very good cooperation. By the end of 2014, they plan our entire U.S. government will be IPv6 compliant. It's pretty easy to get ready for this. This is not some daunting thing. It's nowhere as complicated as what you are facing with the EAS test. I'm just so thankful I did not go into that area. Basically, what I'd really encourage everybody to do is just make it a company mandate. From your broadcast equipment to what you're doing in the front of the office, just write up a little mandate saying, hey, when we're buying equipment over this amount, let's make sure that it's IPv6 compliant. And just ask manufacturers whether they are or not. And ask your ISP if they support Dualstack. You know, they may not, but if they start hearing it, they'll start looking into it. This was interesting when I started looking this up. As far as companies and countries that are really leading the charge on IPv6, Germany, 34% of their networks now are IPv6 compatible. The Netherlands is a bit less than that, it's 28%, but the US is 23%. We've actually done a very good job on this. compare that to Canada. I went to give a talk recently, and I was absolutely sure that Canada would really be far up there. And if you did a search on it, you can find all sorts of information about what the U.S. government has really done in this area. So I thought, okay, I must be able to find what the Canadian government has done. It's only 13% of their networks. They haven't made it a country mandate, and as a result, it's very fragmented. So we've done a very good job on this. And it's helpful because the more equipment that's out there, just the easier the transition will be. And actually now, you're starting to see articles in Canada saying, ooh, we need to get on top of this. So this is great, and now you know how it's going to help your routers, but how is this specifically going to do anything for us broadcasters? And actually it will in a few ways. One in particular, it will make things simpler for us, especially with remotes and connectivity. And I'll explain that in a moment. Multicasting. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. It will allow us to actually do real multicasting. And also expandability. It'll just make things easier to very quickly expand out your networks. Basically, it will make life simpler. And it really will in a couple of ways. Right now, every time we want to get through firewalls or go with internal and external addresses, you either have to have something called a traversal server, and every manufacturer makes one, and every manufacturer makes their own little type, and they're all a little bit different how they deal with things. This eliminates the need for that. And we love this. I mean, we're coming out with a product called the Genie, which is an IP codec. We, in theory, don't need to worry about it because IPv6 gets rid of the need for those traversal servers. It means you will no longer have the whole idea of the private IP addresses came as a result of not having enough addresses out there. So you had these public addresses and then you had private addresses. That goes away, so we don't have to worry about some of the products of getting traversal, some of the problems of getting traversal servers. That doesn't mean it won't be secure though, because remember, we will always have security turned on. Built-in QoS. Right now, every time I talk to a broadcaster that wants to really do a good job with DSL, I always have to tell them, well, you need to get a certain type of DSL, and then you need to call your internet provider and tell them you want QoS. QoS will be built into this. That will make it much easier, and it'll just make things simpler from where you're broadcasting. Right now, yeah, if you're using a DSL line, which should work for our equipment, it does, but you get something called best effort, which is basically, in layman's terms, we're going to try to get those packets in the order, and we're going to try to get them to you in a timely manner. And that really doesn't work. Maybe it works for email. That really doesn't work for broadcasting. That's not exactly what we need. So you have to go back and ask for quality of service. IPv6 has it built in, so that best effort goes away, and that will be a relief. Multicast. This is the one I'm very excited about. Right now with IPv4 and our equipment, we can do multicast right now, today. But there's always a but. The but is to do multicast now. Every router along the way has to have multicast enabled. And guess what multicast routers are? Expensive. Yeah, and then and every hop along the way. So let's say your audio is going to several different hops. You have to make sure that every single one of those routers is multicast enabled. And that's virtually impossible to do unless you're in a closed network. With IPv6, that will go away. So because all the equipment will be multicast enabled, you won't have to worry about whether a router is multicast enabled or not. And my thought with that is it'll mean the cost of the routers will go down because you won't have to buy a certain class of router to have this enabled. What if you're a small, we've got, for example, a group of stations out in North Dakota. They want to have about 10 stations that they send this to. But right now, to send their audio to their 10 little stations, they have to do something called multi-unicast. So to each station, they have an individual DSL line or a connection. It works great, but it's also expensive. with Multicast, you could send one audio stream out to many. So you could either do it all the time, or if you wanted to do it just occasionally, you had breaking news or you had a remote that you wanted to send to many stations, you'll be able to do it, and you won't have to worry about all the hops along the way and whether those routers are multicast enabled. Multicast is, we're just at the beginning of this technology. I see a lot of promises to it. I see a lot of ways that we can really get a lot of our money's worth out of the internet. But right now with IPv4, it just, every time I try to do it for someone, we find one router that isn't multicast enabled. And again, that with IPv4, this is what you run into, is having these multicast enabled routers. It also means, IPv6 also means there'll be greater mobility, because you will get rid of the traversal servers. You're able to move things around. In a lot of ways, it should, in theory, make things simpler for all of us. I always say in theory. I have no reason to think that it won't be, but I don't want to come back here in a year and have you say, you know, you told us that, and then we run into some issue. I like to think of IPv4 as analog TV. A few years ago, I went to Costco, and they were having these televisions on sale. They weren't quite flat screens, and they were analog, but they were cheap, and I wanted to get a TV for my bedroom. So I thought, well, I don't see the difference, I'll just get one. Well, then the city I was living in started getting a lot of digital TV channels. So I'd be in my living room at night watching digital television, looking how great the signal looked. And then I'd go up to my bedroom, and that cheap TV that I bought, that I thought it doesn't matter, it was unwatchable, because suddenly I saw what I was missing, and I realized what the difference was. And that's kind of what we're thinking with IPv4. You may not see the difference now when you buy something that isn't dual stack, but in 2 years you'll go, this is like an analog TV, I can't get multicast, and I have to worry about all these things with traversal servers. So IPv4 right now really is the equivalent of going to Costco and thinking you're really saving money by buying that $150 TV that you then have to try to sell to a friend. So just kind of get ready, ask yourselves, are you IPv6 compliant when you're buying equipment over a certain amount? Not every little tiny thing, but equipment over a certain amount in your station, whether it's IP codecs, whether it's routers, whether it's consoles, start asking, hey, Mr. Manufacturer, Ms. Manufacturer, are you IPv6 compliant? And if they are, give them a nudge. If they aren't. That's the end of my formal presentation on IPv6.
Yeah, how many, you had that little picture of sending one audio stream to several ends. How many can it do?
It could do thousands. I mean, you will have to have a certain amount of pipe to do it, but there's no reason that with multicast you couldn't send it to, in theory, 1,000 different sites. You know, yeah, if you've got the pipe. I'd like to, you know, that I haven't seen it actually done in reality, so I think over the next year we'll start seeing that and start testing it out. You know, the last thing I ever want to do is overpromise something like that.
In true multicasting, if I'm remembering it right, the out pipe is still this big. And where it's like
It
you
splits
put
off.
It splits off.
it's like you're dumping 14 wires on the back of an end of a DA, which is the outside router kind of thing. So, and that's the problem today. If that doesn't know that it's supposed to distribute to the right addresses. Now you can do it internally, because that's why you have that 255.0 address to handle things. But the outside world doesn't understand that.
Yeah.
So.
And that's where, in theory, it should work now, but you'll find one router in Norfolk, Nebraska that doesn't have multicast enabled, and there you go. Yeah.
Because once the routers know what addresses, it just blasts them out from one input. but because you don't have all the routers working properly, then you have to have individual streams for each one of the
Much
receivers.
better way to distribute what the company I used to work for did than the way they're doing it now.
No, I mean, you kind of think of it as a satellite distribution. You know, you send it up once and you got 50,000
And that's what
IPv6
we
will
think, yeah,
eliminate, hopefully, you know.
yeah, and bring down costs.
You may have touched on this and I may have missed it, but what about the MAC address? Is that going to grow from 48 bits to something else? That's the hardware address that sits below the router.
Yeah, it will, and I don't
know the
exactly, and I can't remember exactly what it is. I'll write it down, and I'll find out by tomorrow.
Because I think there's going to be running out of those once IP6 hits.
You know, every time I do this presentation, someone asks me something like, "Oh, I thought I had that." I'll find.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Actually, I'll find out.
Yeah, they'd have to go to an X address of some sort also.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Well, couldn't this replace the MAC
Part of the MAC
address?
address, actually, the companies that
Yeah, well,
assigned to, they've already been
Reused.
reusing.
Yeah.
Are they having reusing Macs?
Yeah.
yeah.
And,
Well, yeah, if you sign them back to
Well,
the
it may
same.
not be a problem.
yeah,
But who knows?
I'll ask
I think the idea eventually is.
our one
MAC
engineer
address
on this
Would be the
tonight.
same as your IP.
Yeah, well, that's what they're kind of going for, but I don't know whether or not it would be interesting. Yeah.
See, what I wonder is, with all these addresses now available, is hardware going to become kind of skimpy on real buttons? Because, you know, you could take like this thing, instead of having the keypad on there, you know, I would just have an app on my phone, and I would talk to it that way. And then they can shave off, you
Haven't
know,
you seen a lot of
$20.
the broadcast equipment today?
I know,
Yeah.
this is, I was talking to Lloyd about this last night.
We have a G3 that didn't have any knobs on it, so that's
Right.
why we're wondering.
And I was
Yeah.
telling.
What?
It's got it's
He has a rack mount.
Oh, is there a little? Is it the one RU?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he has the
Yeah,
one RU,
okay.
and there's nothing on the front panel. You
Yeah.
go into it through the Ethernet
Yeah.
port with a software. And I said, well, you know, that knocked off how many dollars? I mean, they didn't
Talk
have
about glow in the dark.
a display
Well-
and a button.
But, well, here's something though.
Yeah.
We're coming out with the Genie. Look at the front panel. It has buttons.
It does.
Yeah,
Okay, well,
yeah. The 2 RU and having buttons on the front panel is. People like that. I like it. I think everyone likes
I mean,
it.
I
so.
think appliances, like your washing machine, might maybe have a hard power switch for safety, but all those other things about temperature and delegates and all that stuff, they'll be on your phone.
Wait a minute. I like controlling that stuff on my washer.
This will
But-
be your control. It'll send you a text when the.
Great, so when the Verizon network goes down, you can't do your wash.
Yeah.
It'll be Wi-Fi. You have to talk to it through Wi-Fi.
Buttons are still sexy. I was looking at a switch manufacturer at the convention. He had a whole row of like 1-inch square push buttons across the top with OLEDs, and he's showing the same movie on all of
Oh,
them.
yeah.
They're playing
Excellent.
movies.
I like those.
This is like being in a Best Buy store in the TV department. So buttons are still sexy.
I mean, but you raise a good point, because one thing, for example, we do with our Report It is it's all cloud-based. So you program everything in, and then somebody on the other end doesn't see it. So yeah, but I know the products we're coming out with have buttons because people like the buttons. We all like the buttons. So that wasn't the 1RU wasn't that popular.
Of course, that's why I have it.
I'm sorry.
I was the first one that got the radio system board with no meters.
Getting back to your first item on the iPhone software, you buy that out. Well, you're not talking about money, or you're saying other people can use it.
There,
What are the rights to?
Well, there are a few different ways that you can purchase it. Number one, you could purchase it per hour. So it's $29 an hour. Most people don't use it that way. They either just buy the app outright for their phone, which is $249, or what the more popular version is, absolute knockout version, is 10 licenses for $399. So you as the administrator have 10 licenses, and you give them out to people who then use the app. And that's what the majority of our stations now
And
do.
that's it, set and forget.
That's per year.
Yeah. No, not,
Oh, it's fixed
that's
now?
it, that's all. Yeah, one time only. Yeah, so it ends up being about $40 a
Maybe
license.
transferred from one phone to another license?
Yeah, you can do that a couple of different times. Yeah, we had somebody the other day just do that, and she was really worried that it would be a problem, but that way you can upgrade from one phone to another.
Or I mean from one owner?
Well, the 10-pack isn't designed for that. We have another
No, I don't
system.
mean- Who owns the license in a 10-pack? The station?
The station owns a
Okay,
license.
so you can take it off of someone's phone and put it on
Yes,
someone else's
yes,
phone?
to give it to somebody else.
Right.
Now, yes, and that's exactly what,
That's what I meant by transfer.
yeah, and one of our university stations came up with that idea because they said, I don't want these students at the end of the year taking my app away, and yeah,
Right.
so, yeah. Now, here's what I was thinking about this on the way down tonight, is we really thought originally that more stations would use this to do interviews, because you go from having someone on the phone that you're interviewing that's 3 kilohertz to being able to have a 15 kilohertz connection, and it sounds amazing if you do that. And I have audio clips I'm happy to share with anyone. NPR sent us this clip that's one of their reporters doing an interview, and the first part of the clip is them sending it over a cell phone. The second part of the clip is the exact same report done over the reported app, and it doesn't, actually, if you don't mind, I can play this, but I'll play this report. It's the exact same audio that you'll hear a couple times.
There's people lined up behind pins from 40th Street to 42nd Street. They're holding signs that say "Stop the Repression," "Victory to the Egyptian People." They're waving a red, white, and black Egyptian flag. They sang the Egyptian national anthem, and there's also been some American chants, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, Mubarak has to go."
Well, Amy, the police have half of 7th Avenue blocked off, and there's people lined up behind pins from 40th Street to 42nd Street. They're holding signs that say "Stop the Repression," "Victory to the Egyptian People."
That is the same woman that you heard in the beginning. That's the same voice.
They sang the Egyptian national
Sounds like a
anthem.
real person.
There's also been some American chants, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, Mubarak has to go."
If you don't mind, I'll play it once more.
The background.
When they first sent that to me,
All of a sudden it became the background.
when they first sent that to me, I didn't realize that it was the same audio. And I thought, why is he sending me 2 different reports? And then I realized it was it's the same thing.
Well, Amy, the police have half of 7th Avenue blocked off, and there's people lined up behind pins from 40th Street to 42nd Street. They're holding signs that say "Stop the Repression," "Victory to the Egyptian People." They're waving a red, white, and black Egyptian flags. They sang the Egyptian national anthem, and there's also been some American chants, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, Mubarak has to go."
Well, Amy, the police have half of 7th Avenue blocked off, and there's people lined up behind pins from 40th Street to 42nd Street. They're holding signs that say "Stop the Repression," "Victory to the Egyptian People." They're waving red, white, and black Egyptian flags. They've sang the Egyptian national anthem, and there's also been some American chants, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, Mubarak has to go."
Yeah, that just, it's, and so the quality will be even better with the internal mic adapter.
Problem is everybody's going to think this is the moon landing.
Well,
Right, there's something to be said psychologically for that 3 kilohertz signal.
Yeah.
The older we are, the more we believe that that's a remote, and that
I just have a news
the
director
second
would
version is
put
the...
people on the phone to make it sound important.
you know, at first, I used to hear that a lot. And then we stopped hearing it as much from people. And this is what the mic adapter actually looks like.
You always break the little wire on their mic for their cassette recorder before they do it.
Why can't you sell this technology to the phone company so the phone calls are one of our applications?
Well, yeah, that's what we'd like to. But
then it'll put them out of business.
Why can't we get like top hours? We're going to talk to Mary Ann.
So, and that's, yeah, when you hear, and I'm happy to send anyone who'd like that clip. I've actually got a bunch more too. NPR has been really good to us. They always give us a lot of clips of different audio because they've really helped us.
Well, they've been a leader in digital audio anyway over the years. when starting in distribution, you know, to the member stations, they were way ahead of the curve. Satellite digital audio.
Yeah, and you know, they wanted to come up with a system that was inexpensive but worked well, and so. So,
Want to rush out and get an iPhone?
thank you very much. That's the end of my formal presentation.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.